Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchek, dietitian, fitness coach, and a fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchek Performance Nutrition, I've spent the last 10 years helping runners learn to fuel their bodies, level up their running performance, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, then let's get started on today's episode. All right. Hello and welcome to today's episode where I am really excited to be bringing you our very first nutrition Q&A episode. So we've done some Q&A in the past. I've done some Q&A episodes where we've had sort of a mixed bag of different types of questions, but I thought maybe it would make more sense and it would be easier for me and you, the listener, to separate and split up some of this Q&A into different topics. So recently, one of the recent posts or podcast episodes that we did was all about training Q&A, and today we are here to talk all about nutrition and answer some of your questions around nutrition. So, welcome and thanks for joining me for today's episode. We're going to go ahead and dive right in. So, our first question that was submitted, but this is actually a question that I end up answering pretty frequently. A question that I get a lot is: can you eat too many fruits and vegetables? You know, is it possible, or is there a maximum servings of fruits and vegetables that a person should have in a day? And the short answer to that question is no. So, theoretically, there isn't a maximum number of servings of fruits and veggies that we should limit ourselves to in a day. The way that we sort of have limits or kind of maximum amounts of other nutrients or other foods that we want to sort of stay below, we don't have that same thing when it comes to fruits and vegetables, namely, the thing here being fiber. So when we talk about recommendations for fiber, we talk about minimum recommendations for fiber. So women need a minimum of 25 grams of fiber per day. Men need a minimum of 38 grams of fiber per day. We don't have, say, okay, you want to get at least 25 or 38 grams, but stay below, 45, 50, 60, 70 grams or anything like that. We don't have like an upper limit or a maximum for fiber. So theoretically speaking, no, you can't eat too many fruits and vegetables based strictly on, are you getting too much fiber and like hitting some kind of upper limit or upper, maximum quantity for fiber. However, and this is a huge, huge, huge however, we all are going to have a personal sort of maximum in terms of the fruits and vegetables that we should reasonably try to fit into our diet on a consistent daily basis. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one is that excess fiber intake can cause gut issues. So sometimes a person can be having a lot of GI symptoms. It might be gas, bloating, constipation, or diarrhea. We might see issues with either one if we're just trying to eat way too much fiber. And so that amount of grams of fiber per day is going to be different for every person. Like we all can tolerate a different amount, more or less than somebody else. But yes, at a certain point, at a certain threshold, it's going to be too much fiber for you. And we should limit ourselves to not go overboard for that reason. So if you're someone who consumes a very, very high quantity of fruits and vegetables, like, way, way more than 10 servings a day. A serving is about a half a cup, way more than 10 servings per day. And you maybe struggle with symptoms of like irritable bowel syndrome, like symptoms. If you do have a lot of gas and bloating or, upset stomach, constipation, diarrhea, all those kinds of things, there may be a role for you to cut back a little bit on fiber. Or at the very least, maybe be cutting back a little bit on raw fruits and veggies and the amount of raw fiber that you're getting. So something to keep in mind. But I mean, the vast majority of people don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, but there are some people who certainly can overdo it. Now, the second reason that we might need to be mindful of our fruit and vegetable consumption, maybe scale back a little bit on our fruit and vegetable consumption, would be if it is not allowing us to get in all of the other nutrients that we need in a day. So, fruits and vegetables, of course, are wonderful. They have fiber, which is tremendously valuable, and most people don't get enough fiber. They have lots of different vitamins and minerals in them. They are incredibly nutritious. They are, a great thing that we want to have at basically all of our meals and snacks throughout the day. However, they do not have every single nutrient that we need to be a healthy person. So, fruits and vegetables, as wonderful as they are, do not contain every single essential vitamin and mineral that we require in order to be healthy. Or at least they don't contain these nutrients in quantities that are adequate. To support our health. So, namely things like iron or calcium. Some fruits and vegetables do contain small amounts of iron and calcium, but it would be very, very difficult for us to meet our daily needs of these minerals if we were just emphasize or just getting those things from fruits and vegetables alone. We need variety in our diets. We need more than just fruits and veggies. And so if we're eating so many fruits and vegetables that we don't have space to eat other things, we can run into some issues with nutrient deficiencies or at least not having the balanced diet that we need. The other thing that fruits and vegetables are missing is protein. A serving of a fruit or a vegetable is going to give between about half a gram of protein per serving up to about 1 gram of protein per serving. So, very, very little when you compare that to, say, an egg, which gives us 6 grams per egg, or, a serving of chicken or beef, which is giving us about 25. So again, we would have to be eating tremendous quantities of fruits and vegetables in order to be getting any significant amount of protein from them, which is going to then cause a whole bunch of other problems with the mass quantity of fiber that we would be consuming. So we want to be thinking about not only just moderation in terms of not causing us any gut issues from excess fruit and vegetable consumption, but also we don't want to be eating so many that we're crowding out other nutritious things that we need in order to have a balanced diet. When we're talking about running nutrition specifically, this is also where the importance of something called carbohydrate availability comes into play. And so you may or may not be familiar with the term. We've covered this on a number of podcast episodes, something called low energy availability. And low energy availability is when someone is not consuming enough total calories to support their body's basic needs as well as the demands of their training. They don't have enough energy to go around. We don't have enough to pay all the bills. And so fruits and vegetables by nature are, high volume, right? They take up a lot of space on our plate. They're very voluminous. They have lots of water, lots of fiber in them, but they're not that high in calories per serving compared to a lot of other foods, say like grains or dairy products or even meats, right? So these foods take up a lot of space, but they ultimately don't give us a lot of calories compared to a lot of other things. So if you're a runner who struggles with energy availability, in that you have a hard time getting in enough calories to support your training, maybe you struggle with low weight. Weight loss, other signs and symptoms of low energy availability, like hormone imbalances, low bone density, poor sleep, poor performance, mood shifts, all kinds of things. I mean, the list of body systems that are affected. Low energy availability is very long, and it's every body system that can be impacted. But if this is you and your diet is very based on a lot of fruits and vegetables, then it may be that you're eating a lot of volume, but you're not eating enough calories. And so again, sometimes we have to cut back and scale back a little bit on the fruits and vegetables just to make more space for more calorie dense options and to get in more carbohydrate availability, more carbohydrates that we can actually use and burn for fuel. Because a lot of the carbs that we get from, say, vegetables in particular is fiber. And so those are not things that we can actually use as an energy source, or not a type of carbohydrate that we use as an energy source very readily. Fruit, on the other hand, definitely we do get more usable carbohydrates and fuel from fruits. But again, if we would have to be eating a tremendous amount of fruit, which might then interfere with our digestive health. So again, it always comes back to that idea of balance and moderation. We want to be filling up our plate with enough fruits and vegetables, but we don't want to be having so many that it negatively impacts our ability to get in all of the calories we need to fuel, and of course, the balance of nutrients that we need to be a healthy person. So, in theory, no, you can't eat too many fruits and vegetables, but you kind of can. And we just want to keep that in mind if we are struggling. The second question is another one that I get a lot. And actually, two of the questions that we're going to cover today are sort of similar, but I have a little bit of some different advice that I want to give for each of them. So I did keep them separate. So the first one here is looking at someone who is tracking their calories and using an app to track their calories. And the question is, should you eat back all the calories you burn? And, the only real way to kind of know this number in terms of like how many calories we've burned would be if we're using, some kind of app to track this data, some kind of app to track our calories burned through exercise. And then, of course, how many calories we've consumed. And the first thing that I want to say about this is that I don't have strong negative feelings towards tracking calories or tracking food. I do think that tracking our food, tracking our calories, there is a time and place where that can be helpful and that can give us important information and be a data point that we collect and we reflect on. If we are going to use calorie tracking to gather some information, and I mean this sort of in a short term, like, for a couple of weeks, we're going to track our calories, we're going to get some info, we're going to make some changes, make some adjustments, and then continue on living our life. That's how I prefer to use calorie tracking as a tool with my clients, as opposed to tracking being something that is a requirement and something that we're then having to do long term. We need to be actually getting something out of it. So if we're tracking just to track, just because it seems like the right thing to do, then I would really encourage you to kind of take a closer look at what are you getting out of the tracking? Like, are you reflecting on the data? Are you looking back at what you've tracked? Are you looking at your numbers? Are you using that to make changes? Or are you just spending time putting everything into an app every day and then never looking at the info ever again? Because if that's what you're doing, you're kind of just wasting your time, and you would be better off not tracking and instead using other methods or finding other ways to keep you on the route of eating healthy that you want to be on. So calorie tracking is kind of a whole thing. And in season 1, we actually did an entire podcast episode on calorie tracking. So definitely go ahead and check that out if you want to hear more about my thoughts on calorie tracking and the ins and outs of that. So back to the original question, this person is asking if you should be eating back all the calories that you burn from exercise. The answer to that is very likely no. There's a couple of reasons why. The first is because when you put in your info into these apps, like when you tell these apps your height, your weight, your age, for them to tell you how many calories you should be aiming for, one of the things that they're usually asking you is your activity level. So you're telling this program that you do a certain amount of exercise on a weekly basis. It's taking that into consideration when it's formulating your calorie targets. So then, if you also, in addition, upload the actual exercise that you do and it tacks on more calories for the exercise you've done, well, then you are essentially eating back twice the calories, and you're aiming to eat those back. You are then kind of double dipping into those calories because you already told the app that you do a certain amount of exercise on a weekly basis. But then when you actually do the exercise, it's tacking on extra calories for that. The other thing is that the calorie count that we get from our wearable devices can be incredibly inaccurate. So for you to say, okay, well, I just went for, say, a 3, 4, 5 mile run, this, however many hundreds of calories it told me I burn. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to purposefully eat back those calories. That number that it's giving you of how many calories you burn during that run may not be very accurate at all. And so we can wind up, quite stuck, not getting the results or seeing the change that we want to see if we're just consistently, eating back, especially potentially double those exercise calories. The other thing is that we want to be not necessarily burning the calories first and then later on in the day trying to eat up to a certain point and trying to hit a certain calorie target later on. This is especially if we kind of exercise in the morning and then we kind of look at the end of the day. We're like, oh gosh, I'm short by 500 calories. So I'm going to go and like have a big bowl of ice cream or something to make up and try to get my calories where they need to be. This is not how we want to be thinking about fueling for performance. Instead, we want to be thinking about going into our workouts as well fueled as possible for better workout quality and faster recovery. And so we don't want to be waiting until the end of the day to see how many extra calories we need to eat and then eating large amounts at the end of the day just to hit a certain number in the app. Instead, we want to sort of be planning our meals a little bit better in advance, planning out what we're going to eat to fuel our training, having more of those calories before we do our workouts versus afterwards. So, generally speaking, no, we shouldn't be eating back all of the calories that we burn through exercise according to our wearable devices or according to our apps. What I really like to do is use things like the athlete's plates to plan our meals around our training and kind of adapt our portions and our needs based on the volume of exercise that we're doing on a daily basis. So this is a tool that I use in my program. This is a tool that I use with my clients to help you figure out what to eat when as a runner without, relying so much on these apps and without feeling like you just can't get out of the cycle of needing to track your food in order to be successful. Because the beautiful thing is that you do not need to track your food in order to be successful. This is not a requirement. It is not something we should be trying to do long term. It takes too much time. It's too hard to do it really well. It's something that can be used as a short-term tool to kind of get some information, get some data, but then we should be making the changes we need to make and be able to move on with our lives without always feeling like we have to go back to using a tracking app. So the next question here is very kind of similar, looking at balancing our nutrition for weight loss and all of that. So the question is, how do those needing weight loss balance nutrition with their running mileage increases? And a couple of things I want to say about this question. This is, again, one that I get a lot in varying forms. The first thing that I'll say is that we never, ever need to be pursuing weight loss. We all can exist as runners, as people. We can all enjoy running. We can all participate in races. We can call ourselves runners, whether or not we are a certain shape or body size. So if you've been made to feel like in order to be a runner, in order to, be able to have the title of runner, in order to run races, in order to sign up for events, if you've been made to feel like you need to be losing weight or you need to be always actively pursuing weight loss, I want you to know that that is wrong and that is not correct. And there is no point in time where anyone needs to be pursuing weight loss as a runner. But at the same time, I also can completely understand and appreciate that sometimes we want to modify or change our body composition. We want to build strength. We want to reduce our body fat percentage. And maybe we previously have been at a lower weight and we've recently gained some weight. We want to get back to when we felt or maybe did perform our best. And that's totally fine. But I just want any weight loss motivation to be coming from you because it's something that you really want and has meaning and purpose for you versus some external pressure of someone else making you feel like you need to be doing something or need to be pursuing something. Now, what we want to do if we're talking about increasing running mileage, we're talking about increasing training volume while also wanting to pursue these weight or body composition changes. The first thing that I would recommend doing is really sitting down with yourself, thinking about what your main focus is going to be. We can work on different goals at the same time. We can have more than one goal that we're working towards. But for some people, that is going to be easier than it is for others. Even if we're doing all the, say, right things and we're following the same type of programming, people are going to get different results. And that is because of genetics. So if we had 100 people and these 100 people all followed the same exercise program, they all did the same training plan, they all did the same nutrition plan, you ate the exact same things at the exact same time, exact same day with no variation whatsoever, you would get different results than other people following that exact same program. And this is because of genetics. So when someone comes to me and says, they want to change their body composition while they're also getting ready for a race and, they want to work on their nutrition and look at their training and all of these things, we can have multiple goals at the same time. But without knowing to that nth degree what your genetics are like, we don't necessarily know what that outcome is going to be. So what's really important is to sort of choose, like, what is my top priority? Is it getting ready for this race? Is it better performance during this race? Or do I really want to be focusing on my body composition or my weight right now? If we can do both, that's fantastic. And yes, it can be done, but that may not be the case for everybody all the time. And so we want to be able to just rank those goals as like, what is number one and what is number two? And it's okay if for you decide that either way, right? If you decide, hey, my first priority, my first goal is going to be getting ready for this race, whatever happens with my weight or body composition is going to be second to that. And I can focus on that at another time. Or maybe ultimately, your weight and body composition is number one, and the getting ready for the race part is going to fall second to that. And that is okay too. I mean, those are all things that can be worked on with a proper training plan, just understanding and having clarity around what your goals are. But if you are gunning for a PR, but you also want to really radically change your body composition, you have maybe a list of goals that is just really high expectations, really high pressure, those things may not always jive together. So just be prepared for that not always coming to fruition the way that you want it to. So my preference, I guess I'll say, as a dietitian, as a running coach, is to focus on the things that improve performance first as sort of a top priority, because those are the same things that ultimately do improve or enhance body composition. So if we're talking about building muscle, building and maintaining lean muscle mass, timing our meals around our training really effectively, eating enough to fuel good quality training sessions, getting in that post workout recovery nutrition, eating at the times of day when we're most active, getting in enough high quality protein, not relying too much on added fats for calories, instead, fueling really well with the protein and the carbs, getting in enough fiber. All of those things that support performance and recovery also are going to support ideal body composition changes or improvements in body composition without us needing to focus as much on weight loss or needing to really focus on fat loss. People immediately think about, okay, if I want to lose weight, I need to cut my calories. And yes, we do need to be in a calorie deficit to see weight loss, but we don't need to be in a calorie deficit to see improvements or changes in body composition. We can do that while eating the right amount, eating enough to fuel our training. So if we do those things, time our meals around our training schedule, get the right balance of macronutrients, that's our carbs, fat, and protein, and we eat enough to fuel our training, then we're going to be really, really set up for success when it comes to getting good results from our training, getting good results from our workouts, which in turn can lead to both better performance and improvements in body composition, which is ultimately what we are striving for, or a lot of what I'm striving for as your coach. Then, when we aren't in such a high volume phase, when we are running less and maintaining that lower base, in between race cycles is a more ideal time to be, maybe focusing a bit more on those body composition shifts, or maybe focusing on weight loss if that's a goal for you. It just, can kind of come and go, ebb and flow and fluctuate throughout the year. And this is what we call periodization of our training. So we're periodizing our training, but then we're also periodizing our nutrition to go along with that. We're going to change our nutrition plan when we're outside of a race training cycle versus when we're in one. So what we want to do is we want to be very realistic about our training volume. How much are we actually running, actually doing for volume every single week? And we want to be eating as close as we can to those actual needs. Again, focusing on the timing, focusing on the macronutrient distribution, that's the carbs, fat, and protein breakdown. And then from there, it's easier for us to not be getting in a lot of extra calories over and above, because we are full and satisfied. We're not starving at the end of the day. We're not trying to do a lot of fasted training, maintaining a really low calorie diet that isn't going to work long term for us. So those are some things that we can do without needing to literally starve ourselves as we're running tons and tons of miles. Because I've seen that happen so many times. It's just over and over and over again. People put themselves through this thinking that's what they need to do in order to be successful. That could not be further from the truth. So I hope that that helps and gives you a little bit of direction. And of course, this is something that I do all day, every day with the runners that I work with, working on, developing a nutrition plan that really works with our running goals, balancing out our nutrition with the running that we're doing, developing healthier relationships with food and exercise so we don't feel the need to like starve ourselves as we're doing all of these miles, and of course, figure out what does that strategy look like to improve both results and body composition, bringing all of that together in order to have a really cohesive plan. So if this is something that you've been struggling with and this is something that you are looking for help with, then of course, I would be happy to have you join my online program. That's the Fuel Train Recover Club. You can find more details about that in the show notes. And I also offer one-on-one coaching as well as a dietitian and running coach. So you can find out more about all of that again at the details or the links are in the show notes and the details are there. So our next question is, I'm vegetarian and being tested for gluten intolerance. How will I fuel my runs? This is a super good question because it can be really tricky when you have certain dietary restrictions that you need to follow to figure out what does this look like now? Like what does my life look like if all of a sudden I have to remove something huge like gluten from my diet? Especially in the context of maybe already having some dietary restrictions that are going to further limit your choices or potentially limit your choices. And the good news is that there is still plenty of different options available that are gluten free, that are great running fuel. Now, this question, I'm not sure if this question specifically was around intra run fuel, like what you're going to consume during your long runs or during your races. Um, and we'll talk about that, but also just kind of gluten free eating in general. So, most of your sport foods are going to be gluten free just by nature of the fact that they are formulated with more simple sugars, and they're probably not going to contain wheat or any wheat kind of byproducts. So, for anybody who isn't aware, gluten is a protein that some people have an allergy to, and celiac disease is the name of what we call this gluten allergy. Gluten is found in grains, including wheat, barley, and rye. And so people who have celiac disease need to avoid completely all wheat, barley, and rye, or things that contain gluten, like gluten that's been separated from the actual wheat and is in products, which you do see from time to time. And so the severity of this is that we have to be very, very cautious to have, no exposure to gluten, even just in very small quantities. It can cause issues and can cause a reaction. So we have to treat it as if we would treat any other very serious food allergy, like a peanut allergy or something like that. So, most sport foods are going to be gluten free. Always a good idea to check your labels, of course, just to be certain. But all of, energy gels and chews and sports drink mixes and things like that, the vast, vast, vast majority of those things are going to be just naturally gluten free. For energy bars and some of those types of products, it really does depend on what's in them, or say protein bars and stuff like that. It really does depend. So it's always a good idea, of course, just to check labels and make sure. But again, there are lots of gluten-free options, lots of gluten-free foods that can be used to make these different products. So there are lots of things out there. In terms of carbohydrate sources, like whole food fueling options for carbohydrates, fruits, potatoes, that includes both white potatoes and sweet potatoes, different types of squashes like your butternut squash, acorn squash, spaghetti squash, corn, rice, all of those things are gluten free as well. Those are all naturally gluten free as well. So those are things that we can use and incorporate to fuel our running in general, like just to have as part of our daily meals and snacks. We don't have to be relying on a lot of gluten free processed foods. We don't have to be going out of our way to cook things that we've like never heard of or aren't familiar with. And we also don't have to go into a state of low energy availability and not have enough carbohydrates available to fuel our running just because we aren't able to have gluten in our diet. Our diet can be based around potatoes, corn, rice. Oats technically are gluten free, but a lot of them have exposure through cross contamination. So if you can find certified gluten free oats, then that's another good option that you can include. But there are more and more products coming out all the time that are made with gluten-free alternatives and are great options to fuel your running. And of course, like I said, fruit, that includes your dried fruit, your fresh fruit, your frozen fruit. All of those things are going to be great options to fuel your running. So there are lots of things out there. So don't worry, don't panic. If you do in fact get diagnosed with celiac disease, then it is something that is absolutely doable as a runner. It can be a little bit tricky to navigate in the beginning, but just rest assured there are lots of options out there. And our final question for today is, what is the best carbohydrate source to recover after a long run? Can I have homemade pizza? So, just like I was answering in our question about having to avoid gluten, and how there's so many options out there, there's just, lots of different things that we can try. Same goes for our post run recovery meal. There is no single best carbohydrate source that we should have or need to have after a run. There are a tremendous number of options out there that are great. And so this could include, anything from like pasta, oatmeal, fruit, tortillas, bagels or bread, rice, potatoes, and yes, absolutely pizza can be part of that too. For a longer run, we need more carbohydrates to recover afterwards. So our post run meal should be bigger, or we might have to eat more often after a long run day. But we also need protein as part of that. So, pizza, especially homemade pizza, can be a really, really great recovery meal option. We just want to make sure that that pizza does have a high quality protein source with it. So, we want to make sure that it is going to give us the protein that we need. As well, of course, as the carbohydrates. But I mean, if you've got a really good pizza crust, then I think you're in good shape. If your pizza, like your pizza toppings, don't have a high quality protein source, we can always pair it with something that is. So this is where, having something like a side of Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or a protein shake along with our pizza can just help to balance and round out that meal. And, it doesn't always have to be one or the other, certainly not anything like pizza's good or bad, or you should or shouldn't have it. I mean, pizza can and should fit into anyone's diet who wants to include it. It's just sometimes we want to make sure that we are still ticking off all of those boxes for that checklist of what we need as part of our post workout nutrition plan. So we want to have the protein, we want to have the carbohydrates. And if the meal that you're choosing isn't checking off both of those boxes, then we want to just add in something to make sure that we're getting what we need. So if we need to add carbs to something, or we need to add protein for something, add protein to something, then this is how we can make sure that we're getting that balance that we're looking for. The one thing that I will say as part of your post workout meal that you want to be mindful of is just not having a post workout meal that is very, very high in fat, as opposed to the carbohydrates and the protein. So the carbs and the protein should be kind of the focus of our post workout meal. We want fats to be, a little bit less at that meal, or at least not sort of at the forefront. That would just be maybe limiting, really high fat toppings, not going too overboard with the cheese on our pizza. And, just in general, being mindful of things like added fats, fried foods, stuff like that as part of our post workout meal, just because those calories are not going to be as effective for fueling our recovery. Higher fat foods can be consumed at other times of day, but immediately before, immediately after a workout, those meals should be a little bit more centered around the carbs for pre-workout, and then of course the carbs and protein for post-workout. All right. So that is the end of our Q&A for today, our nutrition Q&A. I hope that you found it helpful, got some good tips, some good advice, and enjoyed this episode. I always love doing the Q&A episodes because so great to kind of hear what's on your minds. What are you wondering about? What are you thinking about when it comes to eating as a runner? And I hope that I gave you some valuable advice today and answered some of your questions. So that is all. I want to thank you so much for listening. And as I mentioned before, if you are looking for help with your nutrition, you're looking for guidance, coaching, meal planning, a personalized nutrition plan, I would love for you to go over to the show notes, check out the links there. I've got my online signature program, the Fuel Train Recover Club, as well as one-on-one coaching options. And I would love to work with you. So please, go check those out. And thanks again for tuning in. We will see you back here for next week's episode. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.